Yo, what's up, PKK98 here, and welcome back to Nostalgia Overdrive Reborn. Today we're going to be talking about what we consider retro. So the term retro is kind of like, what would it mean? Like games before 2000, games like 8-bit games, but then what about modern 8-bit games?
When you talk about what is retro, what does retro mean to people? Retro to me was growing up in the 80s, that's all it was to me. Oh, I grew up in the 80s. But now, people that's growing up now call it 80s and even the 90s. Retro.
So I think what most people refer to retro as is games before the 2000s. But the thing is, what I kind of personally say is retro is games of a certain age. Technically, the PS3 and Xbox 360 are technically considered retro.
See, I wouldn't consider them. I mean, I've just actually getting an Xbox 360, and that's the first time I've veered away from PlayStation or Sega. The gameplay on that, I wouldn't say it's retro.
The thing is with there's like an emulator front end called RetroArch, and obviously the name is RetroArch, but it also includes a PS2 emulator core. It includes PPS SPP, which is a PSP emulator. So RetroArch considers PSP and PS2 retro. It also considers Wii retro. I mean, think about it, the Wii came out in 2006.
If you look at the graphics and the quality and the sound, I would say for me the PlayStation 1 and the Xbox, for the first Xbox,
the OG Xbox, yeah,
I would say that's
the borderline of
that
retro.
To me is retro. Anything after that I think was just getting far too advanced. It's too much into the future to be retro.
Well, I think the OG Xbox came out in the time of the PS2, so would you consider the PS2 retro as well?
No, because I think your PS1, your PS2 came out pretty close together. Your PS1 games I play on the PS2, which is the only reason I've kept the PS2. And I just think the quality is totally different, the gameplay.
I mean, when it comes to like the PS1, whenever you play a PS1 game, you can very much tell you're playing a PS1 game. It's like the texture wiggling and the weird, I'm not sure if it's called dithering. It's like when you look at a model and it's like, it moves and it's like freaking out a little bit, like the textures are like, what the fuck's going on with the textures?
Well, you know what, I mean, I love the racing games, and there was Colin McRae Rally on the PS1, which I love. When you go off the track there, you go through the trees and all of a sudden you're in this big green screen, blue screen, and there's nothing there. It looks like roadblocks. I'm
assuming what's going on there is that the entire, because they're probably doing a thing that they did in The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, which basically the entire area was not textured. It was like, here's the textures and here's the geometry of the levels. Yeah. Usually it's like this, but it's like this instead. So essentially, if you move the camera a bit, correction, this was only for areas with fixed cameras. Even if it was like rotating, if it was like a small area like the marketplace in Ocarina of Time or Link's house, then yeah, they didn't texture the actual area, they just slapped a texture over it.
Yeah, it was just your track and your trees, and when you're seeing the hills. But when you went off the track and through the trees, there was nothing. Like when you play the games on the Mega Drive or the Master System,
yeah,
you can't physically go off the track. On the racing car games, you hit a sign and you stop. It just bounces.
Yeah.
You can't physically go off the track and then come back on the track.
What was that one we played again? Like double, or you played? I think it was called Double Clutch. The one where you kept going backwards and you kept like hitting things, and it was like you weren't even hitting anything. It was just like you were on the grass. It was like.
That was the one that looked like Grand Theft Auto, the early ones.
And I kept
from above.
Yeah, and I kept saying that it looked like Micro Machines. It's like you were going on the grass and it was just.
Yeah. I forgot what that game was called, but that was shit. That was another shit one.
I think it was Double Clutch.
That and Tailspin, your favourite.
Retro is kind of like a vague term because the retro revival. So does retro refer to the time it came out, or does it just refer to the graphics? Because if I said a modern retro game, you'd probably look at me like, what do you mean a modern retro game?
No, you know what it is? It's kids and shops like we've just been talking about.
Yeah.
Use the term retro very, very loosely. Shops to make money, or it's retro, that's a fortune. That's not true. We grew up 70s and 80s, and in the 80s we had all the best stuff. Now you go on eBay and you look for a chopper, Mark 1, Mark 2. 1968 to 72 was a Mark 1, 72 onwards was a Mark 2. Yes, we had them. We had the Rally Burners with the mag wheels on in the early 80s. You know, you got them, you trashed the life out of them in a matter of months. You go on eBay now, you try and get a Mark 1 chopper, you're talking £1,000 to £2,000. You try and get a Rally Burner, one of the original ones, you're talking a couple of grand because they say retro.
But the thing is, like I think modern retro games, like for example, like the Bloodstained Curse of the Moon games, or pretty much anything by Inti Creates, it's like, it's retro, but it's a modern retro game, so it's not like made with the NES limitations in mind. It's made with the style in mind, but not the limitations in mind. But it's still considered retro because it calls back to the style, but it's technically not retro. It's a retro-inspired game, which is why I always say retro-inspired.
I think it's down to the era. Me personally, I think 1980 to the early to mid-90s, you could class as retro. But when you got the early ones, the big, massive Atari home consoles in the 70s and 80s, them are now called classics. They're not called retro anymore because it's beyond that period of retro. It's a classic game.
You're absolutely correct.
Yeah.
Like, especially when, like, because it's like many Atari games we can perfectly both admit, I would assume, are quite outdated.
Yeah, because it was before you got like the Segas and the Nintendo, all the early stuff, which was mid-80s to the very early 90s when it was all coming out and it was all getting really big. But then they say now anything before that is classic. So me personally, I would say your 80s through to the mid-90s.
Well, if your logic is that the OG Xbox is retro, that'd be like 80s to very, very early 2000s.
Yeah, well, I'm going like a period though.
Yeah.
I mean, that was out in the early...
That's like borderline.
Yeah. So to me, that period where I grew up, where I was buying everything new, when everything was coming out new, was excellent, because I remember my dad come home with one of them Ataris with a tennis on.
Yeah.
Boop, boop, boop. And you put 6 of the massive D batteries in.
And for a real life example, this is the size of a D battery. And this is a AA battery for comparison.
And the batteries back then were crap, they didn't last 5 minutes. And you used to plug it in the telly, and all of a sudden, this game came on the telly. And it was only 2 lines in a ball going, ba-doop, ba-doop.
Basically like Pong, except, no, this isn't Pong, this is tennis.
This is tennis, but I tell you what, because even you had the bold colours. Your paddles could be red, and your ball could be blue. You had colours for the first time, because back then you still had black and white programs.
I think most people watching this know what Pong is. Even like the most like zoomer of people know what Pong is, even if they've never seen it. It's like if you say, "Hey, do you know Pong?" "Oh, yeah."
Yeah, well, I think that the right way to say them now are classics, because they are classic games. They're not retro. Anything. I mean, the thing is, in another 20 years' time, they're going to be seeing the millennium era onwards, like 2000, 2010. It's going to be retro stuff, because that's going to be about 40 years old, 40 years old. And anything pre-2000 millennium
is going to be classic.
It's going to be classics or vintage.
Yeah.
So you're probably going to have classics up to around about the 80s, and then before there, it's going to be vintage.
Which is insane to think when you say retro. Like I think they separate the terms classic and retro out, because when it comes to something like Mega Man or Sonic, like you go back and you think, "Oh yeah, I love those games." And then I say like Pitfall. Do you know Pitfall?
The Mayan Adventure.
Yeah, but it's like you go back and like again with like Mega Man and Sonic, you think, "Oh, I love those games," and I say Pitfall, and you think, "Who?" Or if you know who Pitfall Harry is, and you just think, "Oh, God, that game was shit."
My brother, when I was younger, he was well into his consoles. He had the ZX81. He had the Commodore 64, and you used to put your cassettes in. A cassette.
Yes.
They are real. Put your cassette in, and you used to watch the haze on the telly, listen to it going.
Oh yeah, the sounds
for
of the
for 10 minutes, and then it used to come up. Hasn't loaded.
The sounds of the fucking ZX Spectrum and everything. It's like the flashing lights. It was like, and it took like 4 or 5 minutes.
See, because I remember he had a Rambo game when it first came out. Rambo, the first one. I mean, that was this 79, I think it was. But anyway, he had that on a cassette, and we were desperate to play it. And he tried loading it and loading it. It used to take ages to load, 3 or 4 times before it would load, and then the game was crap. There was no gameplay to it. But I mean, them now, you look on the internet, you look at it, and them are vintage. But them were out like the late 70s, early 80s. You were still buying them. I mean, that's like if you put them consoles together, there would be time that overlapped. The Commodore and
ZX Spectrum and the
your ZX
ZX81.
Spectrum, the ZX81, and then you've got your Master System.
Yeah.
There'd be times that them come close to overlapping. So people have defined where vintage stops and retro starts.
I think that reason is because people like to go back to retro consoles, but they don't really like going back to vintage consoles unless they're really, really curious.
Because the thing is, yes, the retro costs a canny bit. If you look on eBay for the Master System, Mega Drive, Mega CD, the games, there was a cartridge in CEX and Mega Drive cartridge. Just the cartridge for £22, and that is the cartridge. Do you think if they were selling...
Tell them about the other two games that you bought.
Oh yes, I bought 2 racing games for the Xbox 360. I bought Colin McRae Dirt, the first one, for £2, and there was another racing one. I forgot what that was called. It was only £1, £3 for 2 good games. That would keep me entertained for hours.
£3 in box, manual and everything,
Yeah.
and then one unboxed copy. It was literally just the cartridge, and it was £22.
£22 for just a cartridge. So you think if these shops and that were selling vintage Commodores, you'd be talking mega bucks.
Oh.
You know, if they were selling something like that. I mean, I've seen Commodores on eBay with the proper green old monitor, and some people sell it for like £100. And that's not that for something like that. I think if they're selling them with games, you can go right back into like your childhood memories. Sit there with a green screen monitor with this massive keyboard with a cassette deck on. So yeah, I mean, I would personally love, because I did have dealings with like the ZX81 and
The Spectrum. Let's just call it the Sinclair ZX line.
yeah, hi Clive. I loved your C5 by the way. Got me about the 80s. But no, it's you just think the price people sell stuff, nostalgia costs a fortune.
I mean, when it comes to when it comes to buying physical hardware, yeah, it's fucking expensive. But it's amazing when it's like, oh, you want to buy an Atari 2600 or you want to buy a Atari Jaguar. It's like £300 in total, and then it's like, oh, I'm gonna buy a collection, like £20. It's just a collection like they can buy on GOG. I think there's one that's recently came out called like, I don't remember. There's like so many like Atari collections. Editing Me put up the most recent Atari collection, but it's like usually the Atari collections are just 2600 games. But this one is like 2600, the Jaguar, it's like everything, well not everything, but like 50 games from like all sorts of different eras, all together for like £30.
Getting sidetracked a bit, but this is still a bit retro.
Yeah.
For the PSP, I was looking on eBay, is a Capcom, and it's got all the old Capcom games on.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask you about that because I haven't played the Capcom games. I didn't think...
Capcom is amazing when it comes to games.
See, because it's like a disc, you know, like they do the Sega with all the Mega Drive games on.
Yeah.
Where this is that, but the Capcom games, all the Capcom games on it.
Well, not all of them, but Capcom has so many games.
You know, like quite a few.
Yeah.
I mean, is that worth a look at, do you think?
Yeah. When it comes to old Capcom games, sure they're like brutally difficult sometimes, but they're fucking great. It's like Mega Man is made by Capcom.
I mean, I just want to put one thing on here about the style of retro. I mean, your Master System was basic and plain, your Master System 2 was basic and plain. Your Mega Drive 1 and your Mega CD 1, which one I've got, is a sexy looking console. You get that in a dark room with your lights on the Mega CD, your drawer comes out. It's a beautiful looking console. Mega Drive 2, Mega CD 2.
You know, it's funny
what happened?
You know, it's funny you say that, but there was actually an official advert for the Sega Saturn where they actually did that kind of thing. They put it on like the Saturn sheets, and it's like, oh, slot it in.
And then if you go further, your PlayStation 1, I don't like white consoles. The style, it's square, you've got your lines. It's a sexy console.
I mean, when it comes to the actual 2D games on like PS1, because this is back in the day when it's like, when it was a 2D game, it's like, oh no, we want 3D games. But it's like a lot of the 3D games are just complete shit. But then you play like a good 2D game like Castlevania Symphony of the Night, and it's like, holy fuck! It's like, oh, I grew up with the SNES. Like, let's say an example, someone like grew up with the SNES. Oh yeah, I grew up with that. And then they play those games. Like, yeah, I mean, it's pretty impressive. And then they play like a Castlevania Symphony of the Night, and like, holy shit! shit. It's like, sure, this is the era of 3D now, but people still love like 2D games, and the sprite quality was fucking amazing. The animation quality was fucking astonishing. And then it's like early PS1 games. I mean, like Crash Bandicoot, yeah, Crash Bandicoot and Spyro are fucking classics.
Oh no, I should have Spyro with Dragon.
I actually have a story about Spyro. Believe it or not, I think I have, don't quote me on this, but I think I have 1 and 2. And I remember that, I think this is back when the computer was over there, and it was close to my birthday, and I really, really wanted to play them because my dad literally just put them like over there. And I was like, can I play them? It's not your birthday yet. And I'm like, please? Okay, fine, you can have 1 game.
Well, you know when you put them 2 games you mentioned, Crash Bandicoot and Spyro.
Yeah.
When you put them games as first on the console and you start playing them, it was the wow, the colours.
Especially when you hear the intro sound. Like the intro sound is so fucking nostalgic.
But
like,
the colours were just unreal.
Oh yeah.
So bright that you can't explain it. But like me going back to the consoles, I don't know with me if it was a black thing. I loved the black consoles. This Xbox 360 is the black one.
Yeah.
And I love it. You can get the white ones. I don't think I like the white ones. PlayStation 2, lovely. PS3, nice but a bit bulky. PS4, gorgeous. What happened to the PS5? It's horrible. I seen one in CX today. First time I've seen one out of the box.
Looks like a fucking radiator.
And it was white like that. Mr. Sony, do you want to borrow my new glasses? I wouldn't have one. I could hold me Mega Drive Mega CD in this hand and coo over it. Just oozing sex appeal. PS5, I feel violated. My eyes have been violated by ugliness. What happened? He's made lush consoles. Even the PSP, I've got a PSP. Black, sleek, shiny, slimline. Oh, Sony. You need to get that together. If you bring a PlayStation 6 out, get that together. We don't want it to look like it's just come out of Wix, fucking hardware. Where's the radio department? I want a PS5. You want plumbing, sir? Aisle 6.
It really does look like a fucking radiator though, or like a mini skyscraper.
But it bows out at the top. I mean, what's that for? Is that for when you think it's shit, you chuck it, it'll come back there? Woo!
I don't think it has any sort of like, because usually you would think, oh, maybe it's like the airflow, maybe it's for better airflow, but no, I don't think it even does that. I think it's just aesthetic.
But when you look at the PS4, that is a beautiful console.
Oh yeah.
And then they've gone from that to that, and you think, what happened? Who did they get? Stevie Wonder. So yeah, I think getting back to the topic. Yeah. I think retro is. A lot of people's got their own interpretation of what is retro. Me personally, I think retro is early 80s to mid 90s.
I mean,
that's it.
I mean, as I've said before, you said it in a previous video, but it's like when it comes to people hiking up the price of retro games, it's because they're buying nostalgia. You literally said that in a previous video.
Yeah, that's what people my era. I mean, I've seen them Mega Drive and Master System games in CX today, and I boycotted all the new ones and went straight there. And I thought, oh look, Mega Drive. And when I seen the price of just a cartridge for £22, I thought, what the hell are you going to charge for something in a box with the paperwork, the cover, and the cartridge? It's going to be a fortune. And they're doing that to make money because they know people's going to want to buy it. People who's got these old consoles. If you have a laptop or a PC that's got a disc drive in, you can go out and buy PC games, put them in, or you can just download them. That's your choice of got. When you buy an old console, whether it be anything with a cartridge, you can't download them cartridges, you can't put them on unless you stick in the cartridge in the top.
I mean, when it comes to something like emulation, I've mentioned this before, but when it comes to something like emulation, there's absolutely nothing like just putting the cartridge in. Because like when you brought over the Master System, that's
your face when you've done that and you push it in for the first time.
Yeah.
You know, look on your face. It was like it's what you expected because it was like that's what it was.
It's such a legitimately good feeling.
Yeah.
There's absolutely nothing like, even with like disc-based systems, there's nothing like getting a disc or getting a cartridge, putting it in the console, pressing a button or maybe pushing the disc tray and whatever, and then grabbing the actual controller. There's nothing like that. But when it comes to emulation, it's so much more convenient because sure, you're not getting the original hardware, you're getting a version of it that's like emulated and you're getting a different controller. But with that, the only hardware failure is the actual system it's running on. You don't get, you know, like a PC or a laptop. You don't get, oh sorry, my emulated Master System isn't working properly. I have to take the virtual cartridge out and virtually blow into it. You don't have to do any of that.
So let me ask the viewers a question, and if you can make any comments, a yay or a nay, what would you prefer to do? Jordan's talked about emulators, which a lot of people will use emulators because they haven't got
Even like official
consoles.
releases.
So what would you rather have? I know what I would rather have. A console, a Mega Drive, with a controller, where I put the game in. If it doesn't work, yeah, do it again, it usually works. It's a magic. Or a laptop with the emulator on.
The only reason I use emulation is just because of convenience, but I would rather just actually do that. But it's like, if I play an Xbox games, like my Xbox is kind of on the fritz apparently, because apparently like parts of it are starting to melt because of its age and its model number, whatever. But if I could boot up that Xbox, I would much rather boot up an Xbox compared to, like, even if the emulation is absolutely perfect and you wouldn't even notice a single bit of difference, I would rather boot up the actual Xbox.
So, just if you can, a couple minutes out of your time, if you can just reply, what would you prefer?
Emulation or physical?
Emulation or physical, old school, and then we'll see what happens. Go from there.
So we'll just end this video here, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, we've been your host, Nostalgia Overdrive Reborn. This is what we consider retro, and you've all been fantastic. So until the next video, we say bye-bye.
Thanks for watching.